Possibly. You want to get it closer? Yeah, I'll make some room for it right here. If I close it, how do you minimize tension? Got it. Okay. Sure. We'll have others first. If you think it's like get it on the desktop. Isn't it right here? Well, I don't want to go up on screen. Hey, we're getting a little confused here. 2 minutes before we start. It's right there. Please rise. Is there? Please remain standing, sir. Everybody be seated. Cindy, can you come up for a second? Ladies and gentlemen, we now have 2 fans here. I'm sorry about the heat. I know maintenance is working on it, but they're having problems, which you probably didn't notice. So just be ready tomorrow. I imagine the afternoon it will be hot again. So with that. Thank you, Your Honor. The people call Cory Redwine. Please raise your right hand before you sit down. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you. Have a seat. Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon. Could you please start by introducing yourself to the jury by your full name?
Cory Allen Redwine.
And could you spell your last name for the record, please?
Redwine.
Mr. Redwine, where are you originally from?
Originally, I was born in Denver, lived in North Carolina for a few years, and then moved back to Colorado, and have been, lived in Durango for 10 years, and then since 2012 have lived up in the Colorado Springs area.
So did you grow up in Colorado?
Yes.
And then when did you move to Durango, roughly?
In 2004.
Okay. And I want to talk a little bit just about your family. So what is your mother's name?
Elaine Hatfield.
Okay. And what is your father's name?
Mark Allen Redwine.
And does your mother go by Elaine Hall sometimes?
Yes.
And do you see your father here in court?
Yes, I do.
Mark Redwine?
Yes.
Where is he sitting and what's something that he's wearing?
He's sitting to the left of me, wearing a gray suit and glasses.
Your Honor, I'd ask that the record reflect that the witness is indicating the defendant.
It will.
And did you have any siblings, Mr. Redwine?
Yes.
How many?
I have a full brother, Dylan Redwine, and then 2 half brothers.
And how about your parents? Was there at some point in time a divorce?
Yes.
So when did they first split up?
They split up in 2005, roughly for just a separation. And they kind of just had a separation relationship, just keeping me and the kids up until 2012.
Was there a point in time after that separation that they split up in terms of where they were living?
Yes.
And then where did they each live after the separation?
My mom lived on 61 Windmill Drive in Durango, and then my dad lived up on County Road 501. I can't remember the address name though.
And does that County Road 501, does that lead all the way up to 2343 County Road 500?
Yes.
And then Windmill, is that in Bayfield but has the address of Durango?
Yeah, it's in between Durango and Bayfield.
Is that up by Lake Bayacito?
No.
I'm sorry. Is the place on County Road 500 up by Bayacito?
Yes.
And then the place on Windmill is closer to the town of Bayfield?
Yes.
You talked about you had a brother named Dylan. Back in November of 2012, how old was Dylan?
He was 13 years old.
Do you recall Dylan's birthday?
Yes.
What is it?
February 6th, 1999.
And how old were you back in November of 2012?
21. Just recently turned 21.
And when is your birthday?
November 14th, 1991.
So by November 18th of 2012, you were 21 years old?
Yes.
Is that a 7-year age difference?
Yes.
When the separation happened, did you live with your brother?
Yes.
And where did you primarily live?
With my mother.
Is that at the Windmill address?
Yes.
Did you also live with your father?
In stints, but not, periodically, but never full-time.
Visits, would that be a good way to characterize it?
Yes.
How was your relationship with your brother?
It was great. Obviously, their 7-year age difference, we were kind of in different parts of our lives, but as far as living under the same household and having, to go, living together, we had a very strong and tight-knit relationship.
You guys hang out together?
Yes.
Did you talk about personal things, important things together?
Yes.
Is it fair to say you weren't just brothers, but you were close friends as well?
Yes.
With that age difference, did you ever take on sort of a father role with Dylan?
Yes.
And what did that look like?
Dylan needed someone to take him to practice, to play catch with him, to take him shopping, to talk about girls with him. And these are all things that being a primary figure in his life, driving him to school and taking him, to practice, that I was able to provide for him. So.
How would you describe your brother Dylan, Mr. Redwine?
Joyful, positive, goofball. There's, he had a laugh that was, he still to this day, it's one of my fondest things about him. So, he was a person you just wanted to be around.
Did he like to play sports?
Yes.
Can you talk about that just a little bit?
Well, he was a very gifted athlete. He was, very quick, and it was something I had an interest in as well. So naturally, it was just a common ground for us. So, he liked to train and, to be outside and be physical, and, he knew that he was gifted physically, and he liked to show that ability off.
What sports do you like to play?
Baseball, football, were his main sports. He, other than that, he just really liked being outside.
Did he like watching sports as well?
Yes. He wasn't, as big, on watching sports as he was about playing them, but he, he kept up with his favorite teams and, watched them play, throughout the season, depending on what time of the year it was.
I'm going to ask you about a few other things about Dylan, just slightly more specific. Did Dylan like fishing?
He liked to be outside. Fishing wasn't necessarily something he strongly loved. He wasn't quite at the age to where it was, super fun for him, having to tie his own line and all that stuff, just the stuff that goes along with it. So, I mean, he did it, but it wasn't something that, he would go, do by himself or, do just, without, as a hobby kind of thing.
Did he have a fishing pole?
Yeah.
And you knew what it looked like?
Yes.
Had you been fishing with him?
Yes.
But he wasn't someone, as you're saying, that would go out on his own and fish by himself?
Yeah.
Did he know how to tie a lure?
No, he tried, really hard. It was one of the things that, was a struggle for him and for me when we went fishing. So, he didn't know how to do it, but, he certainly tried to do it.
In particular, when he was 13 years old, was that an interest of his that he would go off and do on his own, or was that not really one of those interests at that time?
No, that was...
the answer, pardon me, objection. We've covered this.
It was asked, and he's already answered.
Thank you, Your Honor. Let's talk about...
It was asked, and he already answered it. Excuse me, Aaron. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Let's talk about phone usage, Mr. Redwine. You lived with him for a long time?
Yes.
And did you live with him up to close to the age where he was 13?
Yes.
Okay. Was he someone who used his phone a lot?
Yes.
Did you see him on it all the time kind of thing?
Yes.
Did he have a cell phone?
Yes.
Did he have an iPod?
Yes.
Did he have Facebook?
Yes.
Talk about his habits with that.
He's, kind of, he was new to it, so he, technology was something he was very interested in. And, his friends, in the world we live in today, it's super easy to just keep in contact with your friends via text message, no matter where they're at. So he was always into, keeping close relationships and talking with his friends regardless of where he was at.
Was he someone that kept his phone on a ringer or a vibrate setting?
It kind of depended. I can't really recall any certain circumstances, but I'd imagine, he kind of knew when to keep it silent and when he could have it ringing.
Is it fair to say he was a typical 13-year-old, communicating with his friends all the time on his phone, things like that?
Yes.
Is that at morning, nighttime?
Throughout the whole day.
Mr. Moran?
Your Honor, we'll just lodge an objection to the ongoing leading question.
You're overruled.
Overruled, is that what you said, Your Honor?
I overruled, but try not to lead.
Thank you, Your Honor. So let me talk specifically about his phone and the use of it by a CITO. So actually, let me back up, Mr. Redwine. So I talked to you a little bit about when you guys lived together. Is there a point in time when your family moved out of the Windmill area?
Yes. I want to say in June 2012, my brother and my mother moved up to Colorado Springs to be with my mom's husband, Michael Hall. And I stayed behind just a few months. I moved up in August of 2012 just because I had a job. And I stayed down there just to finish out some work. So I moved up in August shortly after they did.
So were those the two primary homes, basically, as Dylan grew up?
Yes.
And then can you talk just a little bit about the time division between him with his father and him with his mother?
For the most, my mom had she was the main caretaker. The entire year we were in her custody, with my father coming in certain times of the year, and that would be the times that we would visit him. So Sometimes it would be for, a week at a time. Sometimes it would be for a weekend or a night, but it just kind of depended on his work schedule.
Do you recall the year that your parents separated and split houses?
Yes.
What year was that?
2005.
Okay. And then do you recall which year they were formally divorced?
I believe it was 2009 or 2010. I can't remember specifically. It's been involved, but somewhere in that time frame.
From the 2005 to 2009 period, was it technically a split custody agreement?
Agreement, yes, but we, like I said, we were still living with my mother. He had never really exercised his visitation rights, so as it was split custody, we still maintained all of our time with our mother.
And what years did you live with your mother until?
I lived with my mother until 2012. That's when I moved out, got my own place, and I've lived with her my entire life up until that point. So.
Okay. And then when the divorce happened, after that, was there a point in time where there was where the windmill house was at issue?
Hey, Mr. Johnson, you really have to stay next to the microphone, please. You can put the microphone on the other side of the lectern if you want. Yeah.
I'll try to stand here, Your Honor.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Redwine, did your mother ultimately move out of the windmill house?
Yes.
Why did she move out of the windmill house?
Because when the divorce was finalized, Mark Redwine received possession over the house.
And then where did she move to after that?
She moved in with her current husband, Michael Hall.
And that's when Dylan moved out of Bayfield?
Yes.
Was that around July of 2012?
Yes.
And did you move out of Bayfield at that time as well?
I moved a few months later in August.
Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about that house in Vallecito. I'm going to approach Your Honor with People's Exhibits 22, 23, and 24.
All right.
They've been previously provided to defense.
Okay.
Mr. Redwine, do you recognize the maps in People's 22 and People's 24?
Yes, I do.
Do you recognize the photographs?
Yes, I do.
23 fair and accurate photographs of the map of the area up in Vallecito, close to your father's house?
Yes, they are.
And then is the picture 24 a fair and accurate picture of the defendant's home?
Yes.
And that's 2343 County Road 500 in Vallecito?
Yes.
This time I'd move to admit People's 22, 23, and 24, Your Honor.
Any objections?
I beg your pardon, Mr. Johnson, if I've misplaced those, but I don't see that in my pile of pictures.
Nor in mine.
Apologize. May I approach you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Your Honor, I will renew my motion to admit those allegations. Review them.
Mr. Moran?
Sir, we'll stipulate to their admission. Thank you.
Okay. 22, 23, and 24 are admitted.
May I publish, Your Honor?
Yes.
So up on the screen behind you, sir, I'm going to put up what is in front of you as People's Exhibit 22. That's the same map that's in front of you, sir?
Yes.
I'm going to approach with a pointer. Can you just stick with the jury with that pointer where your father's residence is on that map?
Okay, Mr. Redwine, if you stand there, people behind you can't see, so if you need to get off to the side, thank you.
And then can you indicate, just for perspective, where the town of Durango would be? Okay. People's Exhibit 23. Is this a closer up view of that same area? Okay. And can you show the jury where the north side of the lake would be?
Okay, you got to speak up. And you can hold the microphone there in your left hand if you want, and tap on the top, will you? Nothing? Okay, we're good. All right.
I have permission to move about the well.
Yeah, go
I did
ahead.
it without asking.
Go ahead.
Can you show the jury, Mr. Redwine, just to orient them? Thank you. And so what would be the route that you take up to your father's house if you were coming up here?
County Road, I believe this is 500. And then this is where it splits off. That is County Road 501. And you follow this road. This is a dead-end campground. And just before then, there's a field right here. And Mark Redwine's house is.
Okay. Is this generally a busy area or a secluded area around November?
In November, it's secluded.
Okay. So what is the traffic like up there?
In November, there's very little traffic, just locals that live up there. That's it. In the summertime, it is very busy. A lot of people come through for visitation. It's a beautiful place, so it attracts a lot of tourism.
Are some of those homes seasonal?
Yes.
And then it looks like a dead end at the top, am I right?
Yes.
What's at the top, if anything?
At the very top is a campground. I believe it's the Blue Spruce Campground, but that is all the way at the top with a few residential homes being in between the campground and Mark's house.
Is that a seasonal type of campground?
Yes.
Is it closed in November?
Yes.
And just generally speaking, are there a lot of houses up there or very few houses up there?
There's quite a few houses. Just across the street from Mark's house, there's kind of a little subdivision. And then going up on the road, there's close to 6 to 7 houses just off the road. So there are quite a few houses up there.
And then are those houses occupied more so in the summer?
More so in the summer. Not very many people stay in those houses in the winter.
Now on the other side, to the right on the picture, which would be, I believe, east, what is that road that goes up onto the mountain?
This is Middle Mountain Road.
And what is that, a residential road or is that more of a recreational road?
That is a recreational road.
And as you go up that road, is there a point on that road somewhere where there's a gate that closes for the winter?
Yes.
Is there, if I could approach that?
Yes.
Is there a little, are there any houses at the bottom part of that?
There's just a little house and just like a little parking lot right as you go up, and then just on the back side over where these are, there's some houses that kind of come up on this road that you can see from this road, but there are no houses on the road.
And then where approximately is the gate on the road?
Approximately, I want to say somewhere in this area. It's hard to see being zoomed out that far though.
And then is that also a dead end road up there?
Yes.
So is this the northmost end of Vallecito that we're looking at right now?
Yes.
And so your father's, the defendant's home is on the northmost part of County Road 500, and then Middle Mountain Road would be the northmost road on the right there?
Yes.
Okay. What is that road like, the terrain on it?
It's dry, it's bumpy, and there's a ton of wildlife all year round on it.
Have you been up that road before?
Yes.
Is it difficult and impassable at times in the winter?
Yes.
Is it a walking distance from the defendant's home?
No.
So what are we looking at in terms of mileage? Do you ever walk from the defendant's home up to Middle Mountain Road?
I've walked from Mark's house to where these two roads meet, County Road 500 and County Road 501.
Okay. Is that in and of itself a significant walk?
Yes.
Okay. How long would it take for you to walk from the defendant's home all the way up to the gate on Middle Mountain Road?
By foot, going the highlighted route, it would take between, I just guessed, say between 6 and 7 hours. But that's with the speed walk, and you know where you're going.
Have you ever done it?
No.
Has Dylan ever done it?
No.
Have you been at the defendant's residence with Dylan before?
Yes.
And have you ever heard of him doing it?
No.
Now, in terms of the terrain between Middle Mountain Road and the defendant's residence, what is that terrain?
There's a river that runs right through. You can see it through this canyon, and it's just on the other side of Mark's house. But to get from here to there, you'd have to find the bridge. There is a lot of housing in this area, so there's a lot of roads where you could possibly find that. But even coming through and walking through all this housed and residential roads leading up to the base of Middle Mountain Road is still a hike in its own, and I can't say for sure that he would be, nor would I be too familiar in that area.
Have you ever known him to go hiking up that mountainside of Middle Mountain Road?
No.
Have you ever done that?
No.
Is it, as you go from the defendant's house north, is that terrain extremely steep?
Yes.
What does it look like in there?
All the terrain around this area, minus this subdivision, is this cliffs all the way up the backside of Mark's house. The cliffs run alongside to this campground. There's a little trail that takes you back there that's pretty treacherous, but then all of across the river and the other side of the street is the same. It's cliffs and very steep terrain.
Is the defendant familiar with Middle Mountain Road from your experience?
Yes.
How's he familiar with it?
I know he's been up there to gather his firewood, to just exploring the area, knowing where he's living, to just going up there to, do what he enjoys to do.
How about recreation and ATVs?
Yes, it's a very frequent ATV road. The whole way up, there's a little gravel pit that entices a lot of motor vehicles up there.
Did the defendant own an ATV?
Yes, he did.
I'm going to go to People's 24. And can you explain to the jury this house?
Yes, this is Mark Redwine's house. It is after he had it remodeled, at least from what it appears to be out the outside. His stove used to be in the corner where he'd have his fireplace, with this being the kitchen, this being the living space, and behind the living space being a bedroom, with that being the upstairs bedroom, and then this being a which was Dylan's bedroom. But this is the front of Mark's house.
Does that face in the direction of Middle Mountain Road?
Yes.
You mentioned a remodel. Was there a fire at some point at the house?
Yes.
When was that?
I believe it was in 2010, but being as long as it was, I can't fully recollect that.
Was there significant damage from that fire?
Yes.
And did the defendant have to move on and be somewhere else after that fire occurred?
Yes. During or after the fire, he had to stay in a hotel while the renovations for his house were being done.
Do you know where he lived in the meantime? What hotel?
I believe it was the Holiday Inn, leaving Durango, headed to Cortez, and there's a restaurant that's attached to it, but I can't remember if that's exactly it or not.
When the fire occurred, what had to be redone inside the home?
The whole entire kitchen was redone. This living room space was done. There used to be a back bedroom behind the kitchen, and that got turned into stairways that led up into the top, which was Mark's room. And then this whole room got put in, and that was Dylan's room, which had previously been Mark's house, or Mark's room up here, and then this was a secondary living room.
Okay. Were the floors redone after the fire?
Yes.
And was the furniture replaced after the fire?
Yes.
Including in the living room area?
Yes.
When did the defendant move back into the home?
He moved back into the home in 2011, although I can't remember exactly which month it was.
Does April sound right?
Yes.
And you can sit down, sir. Thank you. So by November of 2012, how old were the floors and furniture in the living room of that home?
They were a few months. I can't recall specifically because I wasn't there when the home was finished or completed from the firework. But from the time that I had visited up there until November, it had been at least 6-7 months.
And then you said 2011.
Or 2011, yeah, sorry. So from 2011 when he got it redone till 2012.
Okay,
was,
so is it fair to say maybe a year and a half or so?
Yes.
Let's talk about that period of time. So after the defendant moved back into the home in Vallecito, did you see him there?
Yes.
Okay. Talk to the jury about how much time you spent there from after the fire till Dylan went missing.
I had spent a good amount of time up there. I had helped Mark finish up some of the outer work on the house, and then there was brief spots in between that I would live up there and kind of help take care of the house while he was on the road, as well as trying to kind of figure out a way to move out and live by myself. So.
Was Dylan living up there, or was he living with his mother?
He was living with his mother.
Let me show you a couple of pictures I have marked People's Exhibit 491 and 492. I believe, Counsel, you have copies of these. May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Recognize those pictures?
Yes.
Have you seen them before?
Yes.
And are those, where are they, where are you in those pictures?
Those, 492 is right at the front door when you walk in, facing the living room. And 491 is me sitting on a leather couch just as you enter the front door in the living room.
So back in April of 2012, is that a time when you would have been living there?
Yes.
And do those pictures capture what that room looked like around that time?
Yes.
Are they fair and accurate of that room?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time I would move to admit People's Exhibit 491 and 492 into evidence.
I know this is a strange request, but I'm not certain if this came off of a phone. I'm not familiar with these particular photographs. I'm happy to ask Mr. Johnson if I could briefly, or would
What difference does it make? For admissibility, it's just are they fair and accurate? Said it was. So if there any objections you have, you can talk to Mr. Johnson later about it.
Whether they were disclosed.
They are. They're in discovery.
Okay.
They're from an iPad device.
Okay. Thanks. That's sufficient.
Okay. All right. They'll be admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. So I'm going to start with 491. Okay. So, Mr. Redwine, is that you in the picture?
Yes.
And this furniture, is that furniture from after the fire?
Yes, it is.
Or is it from after the fire?
Yes.
Do you have the pointer up there still?
Yes.
Is there a rug underneath the coffee table?
Yes, it is from this corner.
Okay. And is this a period of time in which you were living at the house, or was this just a visit?
Mr. Redwine, turn the microphone towards you. It's directional. It won't pick up unless you're right in it.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Were you living at the house at this time?
Yes, I was staying up there.
Okay. I'm going to move on to 492. Is this also a similar time frame?
Yes.
And is this looking into that same living room would be at the top of the picture, am I right?
Yes, this would be the same table, but the opposite corner from the other picture, with the bottom corner of the carpet showing.
And then whose dog is that?
That would be my dog,
What was your dog's name?
Sapphire.
When you were living at the home, how long roughly were you living and staying at the home?
A span on and off of between 4 and 5 months, I'd say.
Okay. Did you, in that time...
Can you resume a seat?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Thank you, Your Honor. So, Mr. Redwine, I want to move on.
Hold on a second. Mr. King, Mr. Lister, if you want to talk, you go outside. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Mr. Redwine, I'd like to move on and talk to you a little more about Dylan, if that's all right.
Mm-hmm.
So, with regard to Dylan, you had mentioned there were some visits up to Vallecito, correct?
Yes.
All right. Did he like to visit the defendant in Vallecito?
Not Mark himself, but he did enjoy being up in that area.
Why did he enjoy being in that area sometimes?
It's just a cool place to visit.
Did he have friends up there?
He had a few, as I recall, but none that I've ever met.
And did he like to visit the defendant himself?
Not particularly, no.
Did he talk to you about that?
Yes.
So back in 2012, was he visiting a lot, or was he visiting infrequently?
He wasn't visiting very often. He usually would just go for 1 or 2 visits throughout the year.
Had their relationship changed over the years?
Yes.
Could you talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah. Dylan was growing into, a young man, and was kind of going, just through, being a teenager, puberty and stuff like that, and needed just some people in his life, and the ones, that he had in his life that he wanted to contact, he did contact, and the ones that he didn't really want to be in his life, he kind of excluded them. So.
Over the course of the 4 years or so, leading up to 2012, about how many days would you approximate the defendant actually saw Dylan?
Objection. This is going to call for speculation. Approximation is not for this courtroom.
You know what? You can cross-examine him on it. I think it's fine. Go ahead.
You had mentioned that you guys were with your mother all the time.
Yes.
And the defendant wasn't very involved in having time with people.
Yes.
Can you give me that estimate over a course of about the 4 years leading up to 2012? how many actual days the defendant would have spent with Dylan?
If I had to say a number, I'd say anywhere between 40 and 60 visits.
And are we talking about visits or days?
Just visits. I mean, they might last for a week or they might last for a few brief hours, just coming in to have lunch. It just kind of depended on what their schedule was.
Now, as we moved into 2012, were those visits fewer and fewer?
Yes.
So do you recall what visits Dylan Redwine actually took to his father's house since the fire and everything was redone at the house?
I recall him going there for I want to say it was a Memorial weekend. I can't specifically recall I know it was a holiday weekend, something like that, where it was just him and Mark, and then I know they went on the vacation to Chicago in 2012.
So the baseball trip in August, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, I believe so. The one they went to Boston and saw the Red Sox in 2012, and those are the only specific ones I can remember. I know there's, a few just brief ones that were in between there too.
Besides that August baseball trip, and was there a trip in Labor Day?
If I recall correctly, yes. But it's been so long, I can't say for 100%.
Is it fair to say it was only a few visits in 2011 and 2012?
Yes.
And some of those visits, it sounds like you're describing, were on the road?
Yes.
In any of those times that Dylan went to visit the defendant up there, did he ever return with a bleeding injury that you recall?
Not specifically, no.
Did he ever talk to you about being injured up there?
No.
I have a couple more questions about Dylan up at the house. On those visits, did he ever call you for rides?
Yes.
And why did he call you for rides from visits to the defendant's home?
A large part of it was because he knew I would answer and come and pick him up. I was, I was his best friend, a lot of the time, so it wasn't unusual for him just to call me and want to hang out. And, a lot of the times it was when he was up there, so.
Would he call you because he didn't want to be there anymore?
Yes.
How would he call you?
He usually would call me several times in a row, back to back to back. And he would usually leave like a voicemail or something in there just kind of explaining it and then just keep calling. But when he was adamant about getting a hold of you, he did everything he could to try and do that.
Had you actually gone up there before and picked him up from visits?
Yes.
What types of devices or phones did he use to contact you?
For the most part, when he was up at Mark's house, it was his house phone. He would call me on his house phone. There might be some times where I would get a text, just, hey, when you get a chance, you want to come pick me up, and I would respond, not kind of knowing I wouldn't get a response back, but just go up there anyway. But usually it was either just a brief text message or a phone call from Mark's house.
How was phone service up there?
It was in 2012 especially, but before then it was very spotty up there. You didn't get service. You only got service really as you were kind of coming in to Vallecito, where the restaurants and stuff are. And then once you kind of left that area, there was no service up there. I mean, you might briefly get a text message out if you held your phone up long enough, but that's about it.
Were there locations within the home that you could go to get a text message out?
Yeah, there was the kitchen window and the living room window. If you held your phone up there long enough and were patient enough, you could usually at least just send out one message.
And how about Wi-Fi?
For a long time in Mark's house, he didn't have Wi-Fi, but I know right before the fire and then always after the fire, he had Wi-Fi in there.
So by November 2012, you could use your computer, Facebook,
yes,
iPod texting, things like that from up there?
Yes.
mentioned a landline. Is that just a old-fashioned telephone line that was hooked in?
Yeah, just standard, home phone. It was wireless, and it was just pretty much just an add-on to the Wi-Fi when he got that service signed up.
Okay. I'm going to go back to People's Exhibit 22 for a second. How far was Mark's house from Bayfield?
I can't be specific in miles, but I know it's at least a 40 to 50-minute drive.
So is it too far to walk?
Yes.
Did Dylan have any friends who were close enough that he would actually walk with?
I recall he had a friend that lived kind of in the middle of the lake, but that was still kind of too far for him to walk to his friend's house to go any further from there.
Is that still several miles?
Yes.
Had you ever known him to leave the house and walk somewhere like that to a friend's house on his own?
No. Occasionally, he would just go ride his bike or something like that, but never any adventurous walks like that.
Okay. Did Dylan typically keep his cell phone with him?
Yes.
Typically keep an iPod with him?
Yes.
Did Dylan carry a wallet?
I think he had one, but I don't recall it being, an everyday thing for him. I think he just had, some birthday money that he kept in there, and when he needed it, he would use it.
Where did he keep his wallet when he kept it?
Usually in either the side pocket of his shorts or the back pocket of his jeans, or if he was, like riding his bike or in a car or something like that, he would have it in a backpack if he had one.
Did he have an ATM card that you knew of?
He did have a card for Mark, yes.
Where did he keep that?
In his wallet.
As well. Did Dylan ever talk to you about running away or hurting himself or anything like that?
No.
Did he seem happy living with his mother?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time I would ask the court to read the limiting instruction to the jury.
All right. In regard to the photograph?
Yes, Your Honor.
Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence you are about to hear about and about to see is being admitted for a limited purpose. The photograph, it's just one photograph?
Four, Your Honor.
The photographs are not being admitted to prove the defendant had a bad moral character, and the jury cannot use this evidence for that purpose. The photographs are being admitted to allow the prosecution to attempt to prove that the defendant became violently enraged when confronted by others concerning his sexual preferences. The photographs are also being admitted to allow the prosecution to attempt to explain the deteriorating relationship between the defendant had with Dylan. They can be used by the jury for these purposes and no others.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Your Honor, in the event it's necessary, we renew our objection.
It's noted for the record.
So, Mr. Redwine, in 2011, did you and Dylan go together on a trip with the defendant?
Yes.
Where did you go?
We went to Cleveland, Ohio, on a little road trip, and went up to Detroit and just kind of spent Father's Day up in that part of the country, just seeing baseball games and race car races and stuff like that.
Did you spend the entire trip on the road?
Yes.
How did the trip start off? Did it start off well?
Yeah. Me and my brother got a call. Mark had just flown into town, so he called me, asked him to come pick him up. So we went. Me and my brother went to his house, or went to the airport, and picked Mark up. And then from the airport, we went back up to his house for the night, where we stayed, just to where we could get an early start on the morning.
Okay. And then you drove off to the East Coast?
We drove up through Kansas and Iowa, and we're headed up to the lakes up there, Cleveland, Michigan, those states up there.
Was there a point in time in that trip that Mark went off somewhere?
Yeah, there was a few times where, you know, he would leave, and me and Dylan would just hang out together.
And was there a point in time when Dylan used the defendant's computer?
Yes.
Did he find something on the computer?
Yes.
Can you explain to the jury what he found?
He found pictures of Mark dressed in women's clothing, wearing a diaper, taking selfies of him wearing the clothing, wearing the diaper, eating the feces that was in the diaper, and just that's pretty much it.
Dylan, back in 2011, was he 12 years old?
I believe so, yeah.
How did he react to seeing those photographs of his father?
He was pretty disgusted. It was something that he kind of had to try to contain himself. When we found the pictures, we were in the hotel room with Mark at the time, and Mark was sleeping, and Dylan was on his laptop, and I walked into the room. I had a conversation with my current wife, just checking up on her since I was on the road. And when I walked into the room, Dylan just kind of grabbed my attention, was trying to be quiet, but obviously was energetic, kind of, you know, like, come here, I got to show you this, I got to show you this, kept pulling me, and then he took me into the bathroom where we closed the door and locked it, and that's when he showed me the pictures that he had found.
Did it impact his view of the defendant moving forward?
Yes.
How so?
Dylan lost any reasons for him to look up to Mark that day.
Did you notice that in observing their relationship together from that point moving forward?
Yes.
This time, Your Honor, I'm going to approach the people with Exhibit 17, 18, 19.
All right.
Before you go through those, Mr. Redwine, did you or your brother do anything to document or make copies of those photographs you'd seen?
No.
Did you have copies of them moving forward?
No.
Take photographs of them or anything?
The only pictures I took were of these on the computer. So I grabbed my camera and took a picture of them on the laptop. But that's all I've done, or the only thing I did.
And by that, do you mean photographs with your phone, like as a camera?
Yes.
And have you seen People's Exhibit 17, 18, 19, and 20 before?
Yes.
Are those same photographs that you saw on the computer and took photographs of when Dylan found them on the defendant's computer?
Yes.
You move to admit People's Exhibit 17, 18, 19, and 20 into evidence at this time?
Same objections as before, Mr. Graham? Yes. Okay. They will be admitted.
May I publish, Your Honor?
Yes.
We'll start with People's Exhibit 17. Do you recognize the person in that photograph?
Yes, I do.
Who is it?
That is Mark Redwine.
Do you recognize the person in that photograph?
Yes, I do.
That's the defendant?
Yes.
Do you recognize the person in that photograph?
Yes.
Who is it?
Mark Redwine.
And then is that another of those same photos that you had observed and your brother had observed at that time?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. I want to fast forward ahead. You've already talked about how there weren't a whole lot of visits between Dylan and the defendant, but was there a Boston trip in August of 2012?
Yes.
And who was going on that trip?
That was Dylan and Mark.
And at this point in time, were you getting along with the defendant any longer?
No.
And this point in time, I just want to put it down as sort of a landmark in the timeline, but had everyone already moved out of the Windmill home at this time?
Yes.
And were there discussions about custody, things like that, ongoing at this time?
Yes.
But at this time, was it still a joint custody technically, even if not in practice?
Yes.
So what did you know about the trip that Dylan was going to do in August of 2012?
I know that the previous trip, you know, we had had some fun, and Mark wanted to do that again with Dylan. From where I was in my communications with Dylan, it didn't sound like it went the same. There was a lot of times that Dylan had reached out to me, you know, just for various reasons, but none of which were, you know, for just to say hi. You know, he was pretty upset about something every time he reached out to me.
Upset with whom?
With Mark.
And are you talking about on the trip or leading up to the trip?
On the trip.
Okay. Was there tension? Was tension higher within the relationship between the defendant and you, and the defendant and Elaine Hall at this time as well?
Yes.
Did that have an impact on Dylan?
No. Me and both my mother and I tried to just worry about our relationships with Dylan and not his relationship with anybody else. And you know, we just tried to control what we control and just, you know, be the best people that we could for Dylan whenever he needed us.
Were there times that Dylan was upset with the way the defendant talked about you or your mother?
Yes.
Could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I know he, or Mark, was, you know, or had voiced his opinion to Dylan on what we were, and clearly Dylan never shared the same opinion. So he got frustrated when, you know, two people that Dylan loved and cared about were not being represented correctly in Dylan's eyes.
Now, did you receive a phone call at one point while Dylan was on the baseball trip when he was particularly upset?
Yeah.
Can you explain that to the jury?
Yeah, he called me on the trip, and I was in a movie at the time, so I wasn't able to respond directly. So he called me a few times, and then by I want to say the third or fourth call, I knew that something was going on. So I had left the movie and then walked out, checked my phone, and seen that Dylan had called and texted me about asking for the pictures previously shown.
When you walked out of the movie, were there already texts waiting on your phone?
Yeah, there was, I want to say probably 3 to 4 texts at that time with 5 or 6 missed calls.
And what was Dylan asking, if anything?
He was asking for me to send him those pictures.
Your Honor, at this time I'm going to approach the People's Exhibit 482.
All right.
Mr. Redwine, I've handed you to Mark People's Exhibit 482. Can you take a look at it, please, and review it? It's a 3-page document. Do you recognize those text messages?
Yes.
Do you recognize the content in those text messages?
Yes.
Do you recognize the numbers involved in those text messages?
Yes.
And then do you recognize the date of August 4th and August 5th as consistent with the text messages you previously described to the jury?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time I'd move to admit People's Exhibit 482 into evidence.
Mr. Moran?
No objection.
It's admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I publish?
Yes.
So, Mr. Redwine, the screen itself can have small print, so I'm going to ask you to assist the jury here. This is the same exhibit that's in front of you, People's Exhibit 482. Do you recognize who the numbers are and who's in the blue?
And again, I'm going to get complaints if you're not on the microphone, okay?
The blue is Dylan Redwine, and the green is me.
So the text chain starts on August 4th. Are there some texts at the beginning where you're just reaching out to your brother a little earlier on?
Yeah, I frequently just like to check in on him and see how he was doing.
And does this depict you asking him if he wanted to go to see a movie with you?
Yes.
What does he respond on on this blue box to the left at 17:56 hours?
That he is going to Boston.
Is that consistent with your recollection of the text messages about the baseball trip itself?
Yes.
And then did you respond?
Yes.
What did you say?
I just indicated, that's awesome. I told him, that I missed him, and me and him like to get each other hats, so I asked for a hat.
Now, the next text message from your brother, I'm going to ask you to read verbatim, Mr. Redwine, so that the jury hears what's on the exhibit if they can't see it from where they're sitting. What's the next text message at 18:01 hours to you from Dylan?
Hey, you should go to the old house and get the liquor bottles out of the trash, because Papa has pick, and I'll delete those before I leave.
What is that text message about?
That is, Mark and Dylan had been talking about some beer bottles that were left that Mark said that were mine. And so he was just trying to reach out to me and let me know, what I should be expecting, I guess.
So is it fair to say, was this a point of contention between you and the defendant at the time?
Yes.
And is your brother giving you a heads up here?
Yes.
Then moving down to 18:03 hours, do you respond to Dylan?
Yes.
What do you say to Dylan?
I said, and if you need anything, I'm always here for you, and I can't, it's all locked up, but it's okay. I got picks too, so whatever.
And then what does Dylan respond to you after that?
He says it's in the trash.
And then after that, there's a gap in time. Am I correct about that?
Yes.
You can see 18:04 hours, and then it moves on to 10:35. 22:35 hours on the same day, correct?
Yes.
So that would be roughly 4 hours later?
Yes.
And 4 hours later, what does Dylan text to you?
He said, hey, send me those poop pics of Papa, because he gave me a speech about you guys being a bad example, and I want to show him what he really is.
Now, did you learn from your phone calls with Dylan and conversations with Dylan what was going on around this point in time between Dylan and the defendant?
Briefly, I don't recall, any specifics between Dylan or Mark, but I do remember just the discussion I had with Dylan.
Was there an argument?
Yes.
And was he upset with the defendant?
Yes.
Your Honor, if I may, the witness has answered he doesn't know.
He said he didn't know, I can't remember exact words, but he said he didn't know this much, and so I think it's okay.
There was an argument with the defendant?
Yes.
He was upset about that?
Yes.
Objection, move to strike. I'm just leading.
Well, I'm not going to
answered.
So did Dylan explain to you why he was asking you for the pictures?
Yes.
Why?
Because he had wanted to show Mark what he had discovered himself. Sorry.
Objection. If I may, I think he's just struggling to answer the same question differently. Ask and answer.
I don't think so. I think it's a little different. So if you want to ask the question again, and then you can answer.
Mr. Redwine, why was Dylan upset now?
Because him and Mark had an altercation.
And then is some of that in this text message itself, in the content?
Yes.
And it talks about a speech about you guys being a bad example.
Yes.
You talked earlier about how Dylan responded if Mark was bad without you.
Yes.
Is that what's going on here?
Yeah.
What was his next text message to you shortly thereafter?
He was asking me if I had gotten them yet.
What exactly did the text say at 23:03?
He said, "You got them," or "Hey," or "You got them yet?" And then he sent a duplicate moment, or roughly, 12 minutes later.
So he sent "You got him yet" at 23:03?
Yes.
Did he send it again?
Yes.
When did he send it again?
At 23:15.
Then did he send again the request of you at 23:19?
Yeah, he sent me the request to go, or send him the pictures to show Mark like he really is.
So moving forward from 23:19, how many times did he resend the message to try to get you to send in these pictures? I'll scroll down if it's helpful.
Yes. Your Honor, if I may, that last message is specifically, and this testimony goes to the forbidden inference, who you really are, and the like is more prejudicial than probative, specifically prohibited by 404B and Your Honor's instructions. I think this is a good time to have the court give the instruction again, and
I'll give the instruction again. I don't think this is prohibited. This does show the deteriorating relationship, and it also goes to motive, like everybody talked about. But all this evidence about these photographs and Dylan wanting to show them to Mr. Redwine is being admitted for a limited purpose. This evidence is not being admitted to prove the defendant has a bad moral character, and the jury cannot use this evidence for that purpose. The photographs are being admitted to allow the prosecution to attempt to prove, well, this part of it is not for that. The photographs now are being admitted at this time to allow the prosecution to attempt to explain the deteriorating relationship the defendant had with Dylan, and it can be used by the jury for that purpose and no other.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I continue?
Yes.
So, Mr. Redwine, how many times, and I'll scroll up and scroll down, how many times did your brother ask you for those pictures that evening while he was on the trip in a row after that?
I believe 7. I believe there's one more at the way top.
He asked you over and over. As you scroll down, did you in fact send the pictures to your brother?
No, I did not.
Why not?
I just wanted to see how the day was going to go and follow up with him the previous day and just see if their relationship was okay or what steps I needed to take.
So the next day you followed up with him?
Yes.
Did you have concerns about if they were in an argument sending those photographs to Dylan in that context?
Yes.
Why?
I was just worried about where Dylan was, and I didn't want any more confrontation with Dylan being as upset as he was in sending those messages. I didn't really want to send something more to fuel a bigger fire.
So as he was asking, did you ever send the pictures to Dylan on that occasion?
No.
And then moving on to the next text messages, what did you tell him at 23:38 hours?
I told him that my email had gotten wiped out.
And then did you speak with him after that the next day?
Yes.
And can you just read those texts to the jury, starting with Dylan's first one the next day at 12:16?
Yeah, he said, "What's up?" And then I replied, "I just wanted to see how you were doing." And then he responded, "I'm fine." And then I followed up and asked, "Okay, just checking, what are you doing today?" And he said, "Going to Pittsburgh."
So is it your impression that after you didn't send the photographs, that argument had ended and the trip moved on the next day?
Yeah, and when Dylan responded going to Pittsburgh, I had assumed that everything was okay, and Dylan was was fine.
Now, have you seen a portion of an interview where the defendant was asked about those pictures themselves?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this point in time, I'm going to ask to approach the People's Exhibit 21.
Well, I want to ask you how much longer you're going to be. It is 5 o'clock. I don't know if this is a good spot to stop. I don't know how much more you got.
Given that you gave the instruction, I think I can finish the portion that involves the instruction in less than 10 minutes.
All right, let's do that.
Approach to 21?
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. Redwine, People's Exhibit 21.
Yes.
How do you know that?
I signed and dated it. Yes.
What's on that disc?
This is a clip from the Dr. Phil show where me and Mark discussed the pictures.
Okay. And is he talking about the pictures themselves in a interview clip basically on that disc?
Yeah.
Is that a fair and accurate clip of the interview clip involving the defendant's explanation for those photographs?
Yes.
Can I see the parties up here?
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, with that discussion, that...
Hold on. With that discussion, we're going to take a break for the day. There's something that we need to do outside your presence. Please remember my admonitions that I have here somewhere. Do not discuss this case either amongst yourself or with anyone else during the course of the trial. Do not initiate, post, or respond to anything about this case on social media. In fairness to the parties of this lawsuit, you should keep an open mind throughout the trial and reach your decision only during your final deliberations. Do not permit any third person to discuss this case in your presence. If anyone attempts to do so, please report that to me. During the course of the trial, don't talk with any witnesses, the defendant, or lawyers in the case. Don't attempt to gather any information on your own. Do not engage in any outside reading on this case. Do not attempt to visit any places mentioned in the case. Do not read about the case in the newspaper. Obtain information about it from the radio, television, internet, social media, or any other media source. Do not in any way try and learn about this case outside the courtroom. Your verdict must be based solely upon the evidence that you hear inside this courtroom. With that, I hope you guys have a good night. I hope maintenance gets the air conditioner fixed. We'll try and start up again shortly after 8, so please get here at 10 to 8 so you can come in the building. Is everybody rise for the jury, please? Okay, Mr. Redwine, be quiet. Mr. Redwine, you need to come back tomorrow morning. Be ready to go at 8 o'clock, before maybe. Okay. And so you're not late. Okay. And we'll see everybody tomorrow. I don't want the attorneys. I know we got to talk about other things. We got to go through the exhibits. Then we'll go across the hall, and then we'll come back and make the record. Okay. So everybody else is free to go, or you can stay as long as you're quiet. Doesn't matter. be right back to help you. Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, that'll be fine. So start with prosecution. Yeah, I have them. Okay. Let's let her get up here first.